here. So let's go ahead and get started. We've got a lot of ground to cover this morning. Once again, welcome to Simple Solutions to Common Cyber Threats. My name is Paula Whittekind. I'm the Professional Development and Workshop Training Manager for the Arizona SBDC Network. We're glad all of you could join us today for this important topic. You know, small businesses can normally be very easy targets for cyber threats, and learning how to protect those does not have to be difficult. It does not have to be expensive. And our guest speaker today is here to help you learn how you can help your own small business be resilient and protect yourself from these cyber threats. So let's go ahead and get started. I want to introduce also Esmeralda Estrada. Esmeralda is going to be watching our Q&A and chat, and she'll be keeping us all on track this morning. So welcome, and let's go ahead and get started. Briefly, before I turn everything over to our guest speaker, I just want to, I know some of you that registered today are already working with the Small Business Development Counselor. We're glad you could join us. For those of you that are new to SBDC and not familiar with what we provide assistance to small businesses. We provide confidential one-on-one counseling for no fee. And also we offer low cost and no cost training such as this as part of our services. There's a wide variety of areas that we can help you as a small business. No matter where you are on that journey, we can help you with business plan development, looking for sources of capital, putting some funding strategy together, financial education, right? Oftentimes we start our businesses and we don't necessarily love the numbers, but it's really important to be financially aware of the business and learn how to run your business and use that data for good, solid business decisions. And a wide variety of areas as you see here on the screen. We'll talk a little bit more at the end of the session today, how to request our no-fee counseling. But for now, let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to introduce to you Earl Gregorich. He comes to us from America's SBDC NorthStar program. He is the co-chair of the Cybersecurity Task Force for America's SBDC. He's also an SBDC manager from South Carolina. So Earl, I'll turn it over to you, and welcome and thank you for being with us today for this important topic.
Thanks, Paula. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with everybody. Your morning, my afternoon. So happy to be here and hopefully kick your day off in good fashion. So we'll go ahead and get started on our material for today. We're talking about simple solutions for common threats to cybersecurity for small business. So if you are joining us for the first time on topics about cybersecurity, just know that this is one of many topics that we have available, and we can go much deeper into some of these areas that we will be talking about today if you want to reach out to us after the fact. So what are we going to learn today? We're going to basically determine what are those threats that are out there for small business, and what are some things that you can do to help mitigate the risk and get rid of some of those threats that you face on a daily basis. So just a brief note on NorthStar. The next slide, please. Before we get started, NorthStar is basically the brand that we operate all cybersecurity training, operations, programming materials, and the like for all SBDCs across the United States. And as you see there, the top line, protecting value, preserving reputation, and promoting resiliency is really kind of the underlying goal for all the things that we do. We want to help you, the small business owner, to understand the risk that you are facing so that you can protect the value that you've built up in your business. We are not aiming for scare tactics here. We just want you simply to understand what you're up against and some of the things that you can do to get things done. Also know that everything that we give you from the standpoint of the ASBDC NorthStar program is standards based. This is not put together by myself or a few people from the network about centered on what we think should be done. No, this is all put together based on existing standards put forward by NIST, which is a governing agency for many things, cybersecurity being one of them. And we follow those guidelines that small businesses must follow in order to ultimately become certified, if that's the case for some businesses, in order to do business, say, with the government, and meet requirements that might come about due to contracts. So you may not fall into that category, but understand that everything we're giving you today falls into those standards, and it's been proven as good stuff to help you meet basic cyber hygiene. All right, so why is cybersecurity important? I think we kind of already know the answer to that question. It's important because we're under attack, basically. But where do these attacks come from? Human initiated attacks. So you can see there, they're constantly on the uprise. People, for whatever reason, have decided that this is their lot in life, and they're going to pursue hacking, and those humans are what we're trying to fight off in many cases. But you also have the automated attacks as well. These are typically put on autopilot, so to speak. They're programmed into machines, and machines are coming at you as well as the humans. And for that reason, we have to be diligent at all times. It's rough enough when we're trying to fend off the person, but when you've got a machine that can run 24/7, 365, that ratchets up the amount of diligence that you have to fight this off. When we also look at the importance, we talk about the human element, and the fact that we get tripped up not only by some of the threats, but by lack of diligence, by lack of training. So the situation that we have here is today is we're going to give you some of the threats and some of the mitigation tactics that you can use to hopefully improve that human element. And stolen credentials is rising up the list, so to speak, of those ways of which hackers are finding their way into our systems. It's not so much they're just beating the doors down anymore. It's the fact that they're able to actually find your credentials in multiple different ways and just simply unlock the door and walk in. So those are the primary reasons why we have to be very diligent with our cybersecurity. So let's take a look at some of the common threats. The most common threats that we are dealing with as small businesses, data breaches, meaning somebody has gotten into a system or has somehow obtained the data within the small business and now is going to use it in a bad way. Phishing attacks, this is a very popular way for hackers to find their way into small businesses, and we'll talk a lot about what phishing is and the different ways that that's used against you. Malware and ransomware. Ransomware has been all over the news of late, and while it has died down a little bit here recently, it's still a very, very popular method for hackers to use against small businesses. Insider threats, unfortunately, we have folks inside of in our own ranks sometimes that actually end up being the cause of the threat. And then social engineering. What you put out there online can be used against you, and you need to be aware of that. So we'll talk about some of those things and how to curb that as well. So let's start off with the common causes of a data breach. Number one reason people or hackers are able to get into a system typically is they have been able to exploit a weak password. They've stolen that password. I'll give some examples here in a bit on password protection and how to make a password stronger. But as I said, we're seeing more and more that small businesses are not protecting passwords. They're not using complex passphrases, as we would like to call them, passphrases instead of passwords. And that's allowing the hackers to find their way into the systems. Out-of-date software, if you are not updating the apps on your phone, if you're not updating the operating systems on your systems, those will leave the door open sometimes for bugs in the system, and hackers will exploit that. Use of unsecure networks. Those of us who work out and about in the field, we're jumping on Wi-Fi networks, and sometimes we're diligent and sometimes we're not. And of course, it's always that one time we're not diligent and doing the right things that we might end up on a Wi-Fi network that's being listened to. And that's how passwords get lifted. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. It's lost and stolen devices. This has been in the news in the past as well. We carry thumb drives, we carry portable hard drives. These types of devices, even laptops, can be stolen right from under your eyes there in a restaurant. Sometimes that can happen. So just make sure that you're keeping track of those devices. Viruses and malware, this is typically the software that's used by a hacker. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in a moment. But these will typically be the start of the cause of a data breach. And then installing bad software. One of the tactics that can be used is hackers might actually plant or drop a thumb drive, say in the parking lot of your workplace. An unknowing worker may pick that up, plug it into the laptop when they get into the office, and now the hacker has access through the software that was on that thumb drive. So we have to be careful of what we're plugging in to our systems. So how do we stop some of these breaches, and what are some of the actions that we can take? As soon as you realize that you've been breached, that the attack is underway, you want to remove the equipment from the network. So if it's a situation where you've got a device that is attached with an actual network cable, a cord, you want to remove that cable from the machine. If you're on Wi-Fi, you want to sign off of that Wi-Fi network, get off of that Wi-Fi connection. One quick way, if it's say on your cell phone, you can go into airplane mode real quick, and that'll stop the Wi-Fi communications. So the idea here is to prevent the spread of the breach. So getting the devices that are impacted off of the network as soon as possible is first step. Notice that the next step says do not power down the machine. It's out of panic, a lot of people just reach over and start to turn things off. The problem with that is we lose the ability to determine what the extent of the damage might be and track down those who might be responsible for the hack. So if you turn the machine off, we lose a lot of useful data to be able to defend ourselves. So network, turn off, machine, don't turn off. Closely monitoring all of the entry and exit points as this is going down. You're going to be able to see quite possibly, say through logins, log files, who is in the system that shouldn't be. If it's somebody that's on the inside, they may be making it for the exit at that point. Just kind of making sure that you understand who's coming and going at all times, but certainly at the time that a hack is implemented. And then make sure that those people who have been hacked, that their usernames and passwords should immediately be changed so that those credentials cannot continue to be used throughout the systems. So those are just some basic things on a data breach that you want to put into place. Phishing, that's, as I said, the next item is, it's one of the more popular ways. If you're not familiar with this, just open up some emails that you've got on your system there, and you'll probably find a couple in there that might look suspect. Email phishing is probably one of the most popular ways for a hacker to make their way into a system. They'll send you an email that looks like it's from somebody legitimate, but it's not. You'll click on a link, and at that point, you've probably downloaded some software or given them access to your systems in some way. As far as phishing, you can see there's different flavors of phishing. Whaling, spear phishing, smishing phishing. Basically, it's just using different mediums to find their way into your organization, into your business. And for those of you who are sitting out there right now thinking, gosh, I'm just kind of a small business, and this seems kind of far-fetched that someone would use these kinds of tactics against me. This is exactly what they're hoping for, because you may be a small business, but you have data. Data is valuable to a hacker, and you also may have connections to bigger targets that they are using. As an example, a very notorious hack here several years ago was an HVAC company was hacked, and they were used the access of their systems. Through the access of their systems, the hackers were able to get into Target and hack Target's mainframe systems. So small businesses are very much on the radar of hackers, and phishing is one of the ways that they will go about it. So how do we stop phishing? Primarily through training. You want to get as much of the examples, if we go to the next slide, please, as many of examples as you possibly can of phishing in front of the people on your staff. Explain to them what this looks like, how it's used, how to double check the inbound email address, how to understand that urgency in an email does not always necessarily mean that it's legitimate. Sometimes, in fact, most times, the hackers will use urgency as a tactic, meaning, hey, here's this email. I need you to respond in a quick manner. I need you to get me an answer within the hour, or those types of tactics will be used just to keep you off balance, so that you don't take the time to really analyze the message and protect yourself against the attack. So there are services that are available out there that will allow you to test yourself, your company. You might be a company of one, that's fine. Set a test up, test yourself as well. And they're quite good. We use a few vendors here in South Carolina that will push out phishing emails to clients and our network. And one came in, it was a Starbucks card. You click here, I do a survey, get a free $25 Starbucks card, and everybody wants Starbucks cards, so click away they went. And of course, in our case, it was a friendly test, so those individuals were given a training video instead of a $25 gift card. But that's kind of the nature that we're talking about here. If you want to stop phishing, you got to get employees in the mindset that, hey, I need to be looking at these emails maybe a little bit closer, and not be so assuming that this is all just legitimate stuff. So train, and then train some more. So when phishing is employed, it's typically looking to deliver some form of malware or ransomware. And malware and ransomware, just understand that those are just kind of programs that will work in some fashion to disrupt your systems. And they come in a few different flavors as well. So viruses, these typically come into your systems, and they're designed really to kind of do some form of damage, steal information, maybe corrupt data. possibly even set up a ghost system on your system so that they can use your computers against somebody else's. And those viruses may go undetected, especially if you're not running some form of an antivirus program. These can run in the background. You don't even know they're going on. So just make sure that you've got something in place that can detect these types of software. Spyware, those typically will sit in the background and watch what's going on. This is one of the ways that the hackers will use to capture credit card numbers, social security numbers, passwords, those types of things. So this is just think, as the name implies, it's just sitting there spying on you. It's capturing data and then it's sending that back out to the hacker so that it can be used against you at some point, probably in the future. And then Trojan horses, as the childhood story tells us, the horse gets in and it plants that virus in your system, and then just kind of waits there for a little while until, unbeknownst to you, several months later, maybe it finally launches its attack. So these are all different things that can come your way through various means, but primarily phishing is what the delivery vehicle is for malware and ransomware. How do we protect ourselves against malware and ransomware? Well, data encryption is a really, really good defense against this. And when I say data encryption, basically what we're talking about here is we scramble the data on a system such that it cannot easily be read by someone who would come upon it that doesn't have the keys to it. So you can do this in many different ways. If you have say a Windows-based system, the BitLocker is a very popular way to do this. It's software that resides on your system, and it basically makes sure that everything that's going on inside the computer, all the data that's being stored, all the transactions that are being sent across the network and so on, it's encrypting that data. It's scrambling it up such that nobody that even if they're listening can make heads or tails of it. So that's what we're talking about when we say encrypting data. So how does it work? Like I said, it's applying basically a algorithm or mathematical formula to scramble the data so that, as I say, a credit card number goes across your network or is stored onto your computer. That's specifically 4 digits, 4 sets of 4 digits. That when it's encrypted, it does not look like 4 sets of 4 digits. It's something completely different. So it's very, very difficult for systems to pick out the data that they're actually looking for. And then types of encryption do exist as well. So for those of you who are on the call who might be working, say, with Department of Defense or military installation, government type contracting, they may require a higher level of encryption than, say, somebody that might be just working with credit card data. So understand that you may have different responsibilities with regards to encryption depending upon who your customer base is, depending upon whose data you have access to. And when you employ the encryption software, you can actually determine what level you need to buy in at, basically. And then that can be installed onto the system, and it will remain in force basically until you turn it off. So having encryption in place as a defense, not only from the standpoint of not being able to be listened to, but it also keeps the data from being useful to a hacker should they download it. So ransomware, the way it works, the hacker gets into the system, they lock everything down, they have access to your data, they pull it over to their system, and then they basically hold you for ransom. They blackmail you into giving them money so that are either not going to release your data to the internet, or they're not going to destroy it or whatever. In this particular case, you can feel safe in the fact that your data is encrypted, and even what they have, they can't read or do anything with. So that's why we do suggest data encryption as one of the primary mitigating factors for ransomware. All right, so let's talk about insider threats. It's probably one of the least popular ways that one likes to find out that they've gotten hacked is by somebody that's on the inside. But more and more we see this. We just had a recent headline of a military individual who pulled this off just for the sake of saying that they could. And so the reasoning may not make logical sense to you, but unfortunately, individuals use their access to your data and will hack your systems just to say they can. So typically, we see a disgruntled or a malicious user on the inside is usually a situation that causes an insider hack. So obviously looking for the warning signs of individuals who may not be too happy with the way things are going at work, checking on what their accesses are, making sure that those are limited to what they need to do their work, as it should be regardless, but making sure that those don't get changed somewhere along the way, giving them further access. That's always a good practice. Then where that one is intentional, the second one is more passive. This individual, the negligent or careless insider, this is someone who just doesn't know or doesn't care about cybersecurity within your company, and they just click on all the links in the emails and give all the information over the phone, and they just don't have that that cyber hygiene mentality. So those individuals may not necessarily be doing this with intent. They just are doing it out of the lack of knowledge. So training comes into play with those individuals. We highly recommend that you do that on a regular basis on varying topics, much like we're covering today. This would be a great set of topics to put your employees through. And then the unauthorized insider. Typically, this is a situation where maybe you've got a contractor that's working with your business, and you've given them access to a certain point to allow them to do whatever it is they need to do on your system. That individual takes advantage of that minimal access, finds their way through the system, maybe opens up some doors that they shouldn't, and then attacks the company. So usually it's not a contractor that is on the up and up. This is probably somebody who's posing as a contractor, or someone who has maybe that disgruntled or malicious insider for their company is now taking it out on yours. So it can happen. Like I say, insider threats are the most disheartening because they're right there in front of you, and it just hurts more because you know them. So how do we avoid some of these insider threats? Making sure that we have strict access controls and privileges on the system. Everybody on your system should not have the same access to all things. There's no reason that warehouse personnel need to have access to payroll, and payroll shouldn't have access to the warehouse, and so on. The sales crew might have a sales software package, and the accountants may have a financial package. There's no reason they need to be intertwined. So make sure that you only allow access to the particular areas that are needed to get the job done. Conduct regular security awareness training. this will do two things. One, it'll train up and help avoid that negligent user. Two, it lets others that might be on the malicious side of things, it lets them know that you are aware and you do have things in place to help mitigate their efforts, and that they are likely to get caught if they were to do those types of things. So you're just putting them on notice, basically. And then establishing a culture of trust. One thing that I try to preach to all business owners is to say, look, don't ever create a situation or a culture or a feeling within your business that if somebody reports a hack or having been the person who allowed an attack to occur, if they feel like they're going to report that and get fired, that's probably not the right culture that you should have in place. The situation is, even the best of us, those of us who are in cybersecurity, we know this stuff inside and out. We watch for it diligently. We can still be tripped up. These folks that are doing this are getting smarter and smarter every day. And if your policy is we fire those who get hacked, well, the boss is usually the number one target by hackers. So what are you going to do when that happens? So make sure your culture is such that, hey, we all make mistakes. Let's just fix it and make sure that doesn't happen again. That's really what you're shooting for there. So social engineering was the next thing on the list. And, if you're a social media user and you've been around younger generations that use social media a lot, you understand the fact that we share a ton of information out there. Understand that all that information is being shared can be and will be used against you at some point by a hacker. So if I'm watching your Facebook or I'm watching your Instagram and I see that you're on vacation, I can go back to your LinkedIn and see where you work, what position do you hold, and if I'm lucky enough, you're C-level, maybe in the financial part of the business, I can now call in and pose as you, because I know you're not there, and I can use any of these social engineering methods that you see here, and maybe trick somebody at your company into conducting maybe a bank account transfer, something along those lines, because you need it done. You're on vacation. You don't want to be bothered with it. You want to get it done. Urgency, all those things come into play. I'm getting that because I saw on your social media that you're on vacation, and I can now use that. So I can also read up about you, your habits, your family members, and maybe place a phone call and trick somebody into giving me additional information, maybe logging into a bank account, something like that. Sometimes it's not always digital. Sometimes it's face-to-face. The tailgating it could be something as simple as I show up to the front door of your business with a whole bunch of boxes in my hands, and I'm waiting there, and the next employee that comes up, they swipe their key card to get in. I say, hey, can you hold the door for me? And sure enough, they let me in. And now I'm inside the building that I shouldn't be, and I can possibly gain access to things that I shouldn't get there. And then spear phishing. This is where I really sit down and I really invest some serious time in getting to know you, and then I use that personalized information that I know about you to either trick somebody else into thinking I'm you, or possibly even accessing systems, because now I know enough about you where I can kind of guess my way through security and obtain access that I shouldn't get. So just be careful of those things that you're putting out there on social media, because they can come back to get you. So how do we protect against that? Well, there's a ton of bullet items here. I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but make sure that when you're sharing information, one thing I tell my kids is, especially concerning the vacation thing, it's great. You want to capture vacation, go ahead, capture vacation, but don't post anything till you get back. I know that's tough. Everybody wants to be in the moment, but as the point of social media is, but it may not be worth the risk in doing so. Make sure that you create a culture within your company, that you're enforcing all of the rules that you have in place with regards to identifying an individual, and don't create a atmosphere that someone is afraid to ask you to prove who you are. Um, if I'm the boss and I call in and say, "Hey, I need you to write a check and send that over to Joe over here to pay the bill," uh, you should ask me some identifying information to make sure that I am the boss and I am the right person to be making that request. In fact, if I'm the boss and you don't ask me that, then I should call you out on that. So it should be a situation where everybody understands the diligence required, and that identity is verified at all steps of the way. This will save you a ton of time, energy, and effort, because once that transaction is done, it is very difficult to pull it back. In some cases, not possible. So just make sure that you're creating a culture where requesting identity proof of identity is acceptable. All right, so we've talked through most of the or all of the threats. Let's talk a little bit now about some of the common preventative measures overall. I've mentioned some as we've gone along, but I want to get into some details on some of the things that you can put into place. And, as Paula mentioned in the introduction, these don't always take a lot of money, and some of them don't take much time either. It just takes a change of culture, a change of process, and hopefully you can implement some, if not all of these in your business, and really not cost you much of anything at all. So we're going to go through each of the items on this list. We're going to start with passwords. So how do passwords get compromised in the first place? Well, we tend to reuse or use weak passwords, and I'm going to give you some examples of weak versus strong here in just a moment. But if you're reusing the same password for multiple different accounts, or the same account over and over and over, that increases the chances that it's going to get cracked and used to gain access. If you're sharing your passwords, you send it via email to somebody else to get in. Maybe you give it to a coworker so that they can access systems maybe while you're out, something like that. That's always bad practice. And then, as we mentioned earlier, phishing, malware, those things are set up to actually pick up on passwords. So that's a big part of what phishing does. So let's talk about how you create a secure password. So you see there the little graphic going on down there as to how secure a password is, and the complexity versus the length of the password. The longer the password is, the more difficult it is for a hacker to crack the password. So I want you to think about how this is actually done. This is not somebody sitting down with a pencil and a notebook and just kind of running through what they think might be the right combination of letters and numbers to hit your login with. They have computer systems with software set up where they can dump in a few criteria, and it will run and literally run millions and millions of possible combinations, to figure out what your password is in a matter of seconds. So this is all automated. That's why it's said, hey, look, you need to make this complex and you need to make it long, because every time you add another character or another level of complexity, it makes it that much more difficult for even the machines to figure out what is going on here. So use a passphrase. Make sure that you can remember it. Obviously, you want to make it usable to you as well. And then make sure that you strengthen it by adding that complexity to it once you have something long in place. So the next slide shows kind of a breakdown of how how long it takes a password to be cracked, depending upon the number of characters and the complexity. So just if you look there, if you think you got a really secure password and it's 11 numbers, all numbers, and it's 11 numbers long, that can instantly be cracked by software. It doesn't, it takes less than a second for them to come up with that. But you add, go ahead.
A question here. I'm sorry to interrupt, but they're asking, is there access to that password slide that they could use in the presentation internally? I think it's referring to that graphic on the passphrases and the complexity.
Yeah, the slides can be available after the fact. Paula, if you don't have a PDF version, I do, and I can send that over, and that certainly can be used. Yeah.
Yeah, we will share, and if there are other links applicable to it, we'll share that as well in the follow-up email.
Yep, absolutely. So you can see that just by adding 1 or 2 characters or lowercase letters to an 11 numeric password, you go from instant to 2 hours to 5 months, and then you eventually can get it up to a 34-year period. Hopefully, you'll change your password somewhere between now and 34 years from now. So you can see why that becomes important. So this is just to, again, reinforce why it's important to make it long and complex. So if you go to the next slide there, designing a passphrase, and again, I like to use the word passphrase rather than password. One of the first things we need to think about is the minimum of 3 of the following. You see there, uppercase, lowercase numbers, and symbols. You probably, if you've had to reset a password lately, that's probably a requirement. You actually cannot put in a password that doesn't have at least those. Frequency of changing the password, some folks will say you need to be changing it every 90 days. Some will say every 6 months, some will annually. Your company should set a policy for changing out those passwords. I will say that there are studies out there that show that the frequency of changing the password is not as big of a deal as actually just simply having a complex password. So if you have met the criteria for the complexity and the length, the frequency of change is not as big of an issue. So just keep that in mind out there. And then having a lockout set up on the system such that if somebody tries a password a certain number of times, they're then locked out for a period of time. That's always a good practice as well. That'll prevent brute force attack, where a machine comes in and hammers a bunch of passwords into the system trying to gain access. If you cut it off at 3 or 4, whatever you cut it off at, then you've shut that down as well. So it helps with the automated part. And then, not allowing somebody to reuse the same password over and over is another really good way of protecting yourself, protecting the passphrase. If you don't want to mess with this at all, you can use a password manager, which is highly recommended. And basically, you have a password that you set up for the password manager. And then from that point on, password manager will make sure that you have a random and highly complex password for every unique use that you need for all software that requires a password. This data is held in the cloud. It's encrypted, and it's been proven to be very effective. Now, some of you might be saying, okay, yeah, but I just heard that I think it was LastPass just got hacked. So what happened then? Well, as I said earlier, the hacker may have gained access, but all they did was gain access to a list of encrypted data files that basically had no use whatsoever to them. So yeah, it's a very safe practice to use. And if you're like me, you can't remember the 12 different passwords that are required to get into all the different things that you have. So this can be a way to help you get around that. All right, so let's move on to threat detection. Threat detection basically is what it sounds like. You know, what do I have on my system to tell me, hey, there's somebody trying to get into my system through, say, a virus, malware, something like that. These are things that you've probably heard of or seen maybe on your existing machines. McAfee, Norton, Windows Defender, these are all very popular brands out there. I personally use the Norton package myself, Norton 360. And what I like about these is most of them will carry the basics that we've been talking about here today. So for instance, the Norton 360 package, I get a VPN, which we'll talk about here in just a moment. I get malware detection, antivirus protection. I get a password keeper, and you know, all of that is in one place. And it makes it simple. And if you're going to get your folks at work or yourself to incorporate this into their daily operations, it needs to be simple. So it will cost you a little bit. I think my subscription for 5 machines for Norton is like $120 a year, but it's still a very, very small price to pay for that that feeling of security. So some of the benefits that you'll reap from the threat detection on the next slide there is one, you may be required from a compliance standpoint to show that you have some form of detection. Again, this is going back to those who might be in the contracting realm and have some requirements put upon them. So there may be a regulatory element that's driving you having some form of threat detection. It'll give you a much better position to respond to incidents that are coming at your company. So you should be able to get to these much quicker than maybe if you didn't have these threat detection packages in place. And then the reducing dwell time, basically what that's saying is viruses won't have the opportunity to just kind of hang around on the system. Because these detection programs are constantly updated with the latest and greatest threats. So they're constantly monitoring your system for indications that there might be something kind of lurking in the background. So reduce that time. And it puts everybody on notice that, hey, we're taking security serious here. And that will help everybody kind of keep that front of mind. When it comes to being out there in Wi-Fi land, one of the things that we talk about using is a virtual private network or a VPN package. And this helps with that encryption element that we were talking about earlier. It protects your identity as you're surfing the web. And you see there's 4 different packages that you can choose from. Some of them have a small fee. Some of them have a free amount that you can use them over a period of time, and then they will charge over a certain amount of usage. But there really isn't any excuse that anybody should be on a Wi-Fi network without a VPN in place. It does not take a whole lot. So yeah, that'll get your encryption package in place. And we even use, for those of us that are in the academic world, we have a VPN on at all times. Even if we're hardwired into our systems, we use a VPN for the sake of security. So I would just get in the habit of having it on at all times. It really does not degrade the operation of your equipment. And again, it's just one extra layer of diligence there. Physical protection, that's pretty straightforward. Make sure your doors are locked. Make sure your servers and your systems are put behind locked doors. Filing cabinets are locked. People assume data means digital, and it doesn't always mean digital. Paper laying on a desk and at night, you don't know, somebody from the cleaning crew takes a picture of that client list, and that becomes valuable. make sure you're putting that kind of stuff away. Make sure you are inventorying your hardware, thumb drives and hard drives and the like. Make sure that you've got those inventoried so you know where they are at all times. And also think about when you're getting rid of some of this stuff. If you're, don't just throw away a hard drive, don't just throw away a thumb drive. Don't donate a copy machine or a printer. Those have hard drives in them as well, and all of those contain data from your systems. So physical security is just as important as some of the digital aspects of what we're talking about today. We talked about updating and patching your software a little bit earlier. Probably not a whole lot more to add on this slide, other than if you can make your updates automated, do that. Allow your software to update itself. And then on the flip side of that, if you have software that you are no longer using, especially on your phone, apps on your phone, get rid of those. If you're not using them, delete them, disable them, get them off of your system. Old, outdated software, apps on phones are highly sought after by hackers because they know you're not keeping them up. They know that they've probably gotten bugs at this point, and they can use that as a backdoor to your systems. Backups. That one is probably the number one on my list of things that you should be doing. If you go to the next slide there, backups will protect you from a recovery standpoint, especially if you're held for ransom and you've had things encrypted up to that point. It's not painless, but it is certainly a lot easier to just simply take the systems down to their initial install and then restore from a backup, and you should be good. But if you don't have backups or you don't have working backups, you're not able to do that. Follow the 3-2-1 approach when it comes to backups. You should always maintain 3 copies. You should always have at least 2 different types of backups. So say one on a thumb drive and one on the cloud, one on a hard drive, one on a thumb drive, something like that. And then one of those backups should always be maintained off-site. So 3-2-1, 3 copies, 2 mediums, 1 off-site. And that's a really good backup process to have in place. And then incrementally backup. You have full system backup where you back up every single thing on your systems. Then you have a file backup where you're basically you're capturing backups of just the files that have been updated. And then incrementally you're doing a little bit of both, so that you are always no more than, maybe a few days behind on your backups, and restoration would never put you that far behind. So backup. If you're not doing that, that's your first level of assignment after this class. Mobile devices. Make sure your mobile devices are locked down. You should have a passcode. You should have some form of a biometric entry to all your systems. They should auto lock after a certain period of time, and you should be able to remotely shut down your mobile devices as well. These carry so much information. Chances are most of you on the call probably have a file on your device that has some kind of a quote unquote encrypted password list, I would guess. And if someone were to get a hold of that, I can only imagine the damage they could do. So safeguarding mobile devices is a huge deal, especially if you're running a business where you have clients, or not clients, but employees running around with these devices. You want to make sure that they're caring for them properly. So some final thoughts. Oops, I missed one there. Avoiding public Wi-Fi. Yeah, try to use your own devices. Go ahead and go to the next slide there. Try not to use public Wi-Fi if at all possible. If you do, use a VPN as we talked about. And then don't have Bluetooth and Wi-Fi to set to automatically connect. If you do that, then you're opening yourself up to somebody being able to listen into the data that's being exchanged back and forth. So, all right. So final thoughts. As far as mitigation and some of the things we talked about today, just make sure that you're making this a part of your day-to-day operations. You can go to the next slide. Changing the culture, changing the process, changing the mindset really is what this is all about. Training the individuals, whether that's just you or a staff of employees, making sure you're diligently training people on what the current threats are and how to identify them and how to mitigate them. You cannot stop. A hacker only has to get it right one time. You have to get it right every time. So making sure that you're controlling the access, you're setting up the right culture, you're making sure that people understand the importance of this security. That's key to being successful. So as we close, I just wanted to also point out there are some other things that you can do to mitigate some of these threats. Cyber insurance, very expensive these days. It's really, in my opinion, it's not a viable option for most small businesses. Having an attorney, a consultant, a team that is readily available in the event of a hack, that's something that we also recommend. Putting clear-cut policies together for your staff so that they understand what they can and cannot do on systems. How do you handle people bringing their own device to work, what they can and cannot post on social media, those types of things. Those are all really good things to do as well. And we have classes on all of these topics. There's just not enough time. We're running up against it now. So we'll be happy to handle those at a future time if needed. But with that, Paula, do we have any questions we need to answer or?
I didn't see anything from this
We
side.
did have a question about the applications or systems that are used for data encryption.
It was a question about the applications used for data encryption.
Yeah, so what are some applications or systems used for data encryption?
So it's a lot of times it's dependent upon the operating system that you're using. So Windows, the primary one for Windows is BitLocker. Apple claims that theirs is fine out of the box. If you want to go beyond those, then I would recommend that you kind of research the type of data that you are trying to protect and the level of encryption that might be required. So if you're say storing data that is associated with, say, a DoD contract, Department of Defense contract, that's going to require a different level of encryption software than, say, somebody who's running a medical office and they have HIPAA data. So you might have to get specific by industry, and we can help you track that down if you want to email us.
I see one other here. Is there another webinar on data encryption? I just lost it, sorry. Is there another webinar on data encryption specifically? The Arizona SBDC does not have one, Earl, but I don't know if you know of any other potential trainings that we could provide links to after our session today.
Yeah, I'm not aware of one immediately on that specific topic. If they want to go to the americassbdc.org website, typically we post our materials and slide decks there. If we have one upcoming, it will appear there.
And there's some short videos there as well. And that address is there listed at the bottom of the slide. Okay,
Yep.
I know we've run short on time. Let's go ahead and just wrap up. Here again, as I mentioned, we provide one-on-one counseling to small businesses across Arizona. And here on the map, you'll see locations. We have locations across the state. If you're interested in SBDC counseling, just follow the links and request counseling, and that will put you to a center closest to where you have your small business. We hope to see you and to be able to help you in whether it's cybersecurity or any of those areas of business development. We do have counselors that can help you continue to grow and make your business resilient, especially in the cybersecurity area and all other areas. All right, so we got links here for requesting the counseling. We do have training programs offered across the state, some in person, some virtually. The link will provide you with a listing of those different trainings. Our next cyber-related topic is coming up the end of November. And that will be, we'll have a guest speaker from the IRS, and they're going to go over some identity theft and ways to protect you in that area. So we hope to see you at a future training. And that wraps it up. Esmeralda, do you want to have any parting thoughts about the follow-up communications?
Thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you, Earl. You will be receiving an email within 24 hours, including today's presentation and the PDF version of the presentation. And then you'll also be receiving a survey. If you could fill that out for us, that'll help us help you for future training sessions. Again, thank you all for joining us. And that's all. Paula, did you have anything else to add?
No, that's it. We hope you all have a great day, and we hope to see you again at a future training. Thank you, Earl, for all of your expertise today.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.